My name is Cathal Doherty, statistician in the demography section in the Central Statistics Office. Today I will present results on Profile 1, Population Distribution and Movements from the Census of Population. The work that I will present on today was performed by myself and my colleague, statistician Dr. Tracy Clegg from the Census Division. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the public for their cooperation during the data collection phase of the Census of Population. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the excellent Census team for their hard work collating and putting these results together. Today's presentation will have three sections. The first section will look at population distribution, the second section will look at county of birth, and the third section will look at internal migration. Before I start, just a quick note on urban areas in Census 2022. For Census 2022, the CSO has introduced a new way of defining urban areas. Built-up areas, or BUAs, were developed in conjunction with the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage and Ordnance Survey Ireland, now Tailteann Éireann. These were created using a different approach to the settlements used in Census 2016. For this reason, there is no direct comparison of the data for urban areas between the two censuses in this publication. The CSO has put together a dedicated page on built-up areas with every piece of information you need to know, including a recorded presentation and a frequently asked questions document. Looking at the population of towns, we can see that Drogheda is the largest town in Ireland with just above 44,000 people in 2022. There were 5 towns in Ireland with a population above 30,000 people, and interestingly, they were all in Leinster. Ennis, with just below 28,000 people, was the largest town in Munster. Letterkenny, with just above 22,500 people, was the largest town in Ulster part of. And Sligo, with just above 20,600 people, was the largest town in Connacht. For the next 4 slides, I will refer to medium and large towns. Medium towns have a population of between 1,500 and 10,000 people, and large towns have a population of above 10,000 people. The chart on the right looks at the youngest medium towns by population and average age. The bar refers to the population size of individual towns, and the line refers to the average age of the particular town. There were 12 medium towns that had average age of under 33 years. Saggart in Dublin was the youngest medium town with an average age of 30.4 years. 8 of the towns were in Dublin or surrounding counties, including Meath, Kildare, Louth and Wicklow. The remaining towns were close to Galway and Cork City. The chart on the right looks at the oldest medium towns by population and average age in 2022. Once again, the bars refer to the population size of individual towns, and the line refers to the average age of the particular town. There were 12 medium-sized towns that had average age above 42 years. Ballyshannon in Donegal and Dingle in Kerry were the oldest towns, both with an average age of 44.4 years in 2022. 9 of the medium-sized towns were on the western seaboard in counties Kerry, Roscommon, Donegal, Cork and Clare. Remaining medium-sized towns were in Wexford, Kilkenny and Limerick. Now moving to larger towns, the graph on the right looks at the youngest large towns by total population and average age in 2022. The bars refer to the population size of the individual towns, and the line refers to the average age of the individual towns. 10 large towns had average age under 36 years. Balbriggan in Dublin was the youngest large town in 2022 with an average age of 33.6 years. 8 of the towns were in Dublin or nearby counties, including Meath, Kildare and Laois. There were no large towns in Connacht with average age under 36 years. The chart on the right looks at the oldest large towns by total population and average age in 2022. Like the previous 3 slides, the bars refer to the population size and the line refers to the average age of the particular town. There were 14 large towns with average age of 39 years or above. Clonmel was the oldest large town in 2022 with an average age of 40.8 years. And among the oldest large towns, the most highly populated were Bray, Kilkenny, Tralee, Wexford, Sligo, Malahide and Clonmel. It's interesting to look at the population distribution across counties from 1841 to 2022. This chart shows the population of Dublin between these periods, looking at the census from 1841 and every census since then up to 2022. Population of Dublin has increased in all but one intercensal period, which was 1861 to 1871. This is not the case for other counties where population declined until the 60s and 70s and increased steadily since then. This chart looks at the population distribution for particular counties from 1841 to 2022. Starting from the bottom of each bar to the top, we have Cork, Galway, Tipperary, Mayo, Dublin, Meath, Louth, Wicklow and Kildare. 2022 is the first time since 1851 that the population has surpassed a 5 million threshold. Interestingly, population in just 5 counties have increased over this period. These are the populations for Dublin. You can see the grey bar from the left to the right has increased substantially. Meath has increased. Louth, Wicklow and Kildare have all also increased. When you look at the population of the largest counties in 1841, Cork, Galway, Tipperary and Mayo, you will see on the chart, if you look from the left to the right, that the populations of these counties have not surpassed their values from back near the famine time and indeed have decreased considerably from 1841. Looking at age structure by county can be done by looking at age pyramids. Age pyramids are an excellent way to see how age profiles differ across Ireland in 2022. An age pyramid graphs single year of age on the left for males and on the right for females, which allows us to see the age structure for a cohort. Generally in cities, we see relatively fewer children and larger cohorts of adults. And in most counties, we see higher proportions of children under 20 and adults in their 30s and 40s. The 2 charts shown for Galway City and Galway County give a good illustration of these differences in 2022. You can see on the left for Galway City a lower proportion of those less than 20 when compared with Galway County on the right, where there's a higher proportion of those less than 20. Galway City on the left also seems to have a higher proportion of those in their 20s, and Galway County on the right seems to have a higher proportion of those in their 20s and 30s. Continuing to look at population distribution, we can see how the population is distributed across our towns, cities, and the remainder of the country. There are 1.7 million people, or 34% of the population, residing in cities and suburbs. 1.9 million people, or 37% of the population, were in one of the 862 towns that were defined by the BUAs during Census 2022. The remainder of the population was 1.5 million people. Population density is the number of persons per square kilometre. The population density of the state in 2022 was 73 people per kilometre squared. The map on the right looks at the population density by electoral division for Ireland. You can see that there are pockets of densely populated areas close to our cities, close to Dublin, close to Cork, close to Limerick, close to Galway and close to Waterford. You can see densely populated areas. The most densely populated towns in the state or Concealy Draining and Balbriggan. The next section of the presentation will look at place of birth. Place of birth in the census was determined by the response to question 6, what is your place of birth? The respondent would answer with the county of their birth, and if they weren't born in a county in Ireland, they would respond with the country that they were born in. 74% of Irish residents live in their county of birth. 20% of usual residents were born abroad, which was an increase from 17% in 2016. Assessing place of birth and county of residence is done so with the chart on the right, which looks at the percentage of usual residents born in the county of residence, elsewhere in Ireland, or a different country. The navy bar to the left of the graph looks at the percentage born in the county of usual residence. Next is the green bar, which looks at the percentage born outside the county of birth. And the yellow bar on the right looks at the percentage born outside Ireland. 60% of all residents live in the county of birth. The highest percentage of residents born in their county of birth is in Cork, where 72% of those residing in Cork were born in Cork. The lowest percentage was for Meath, where 32% of the residents of Meath were born in Meath. And the county with the highest percentage born abroad was Dublin, where 25% of the residents of Dublin were born abroad. Next, I'll talk about the place of birth by age. The chart on the right looks at the percentage of usual residents born in the county, outside the county, or another country by age. The blue bar at the bottom of each bar is the percentage born in the county of usual residence. Next is the green bar, which is the percentage born in another county. And finally, the yellow bar looks at the percentage born in another country. 75% of those under 15 and 65% of those 65 years and above were living in their county of birth. The highest percentage for those born abroad was among the 25 to 44-year-olds, with a percentage of 32%. It's interesting to look at Dublin-born residents. There were 1.3 million people born in County Dublin. The map on the right looks at the percentage within an electoral division that were born in Dublin. And as you would expect, there seems to be higher percentages in around Dublin and the greater Dublin area and around the east. 29% of those born in Dublin live in Dublin City. Towns with the highest percentage of Dubliners outside County Dublin include Johnstown in Kildare with 53%, Kilpedlar in Wicklow with 52%, Rathote in Meath with 52%, and Kill in Kildare with 51%. The final section that I will present on today looks at internal migration. Internal migration is determined using question 8 from the census. This question asks, where did you usually live 1 year ago? The 3 responses were the same as no. Second response is elsewhere in Ireland. And the third response is elsewhere abroad. So internal migration is determined by those who responded with number 2. 265,000 people moved home within Ireland in the previous 12 months. This is 5% of the usual residents. This is down slightly on the 2016 and the 2011 percentages, which were both 6%. We can look at the county that the person moved from. The chart on the right looks at usual residents who moved within the state in the year prior to the census by the county of their previous residence. The blue bar looks at the percentage of people who moved to a different county, and the green bar looks at the percentage of people who moved within the same county. Overall, 29% of movers moved to a different county. Roscommon had the highest percentage moving to a different county with 47%. Cork had the lowest percentage moving to a different county with 18%. The destination of the Dublin leavers is examined in this slide. There were just below 22,000 movers who moved out of County Dublin. The map on the right looks at the percentage of Dublin leavers and the county that they left to go to. As you would expect, the highest percentages are in bordering counties. Kildare had the highest percentage of Dublin leavers with 19% or 4,000. Next was Meath with 15% of the Dublin leavers or 3,285 people. And then the largest non-Leinster county was Cork, where 7% of the Dublin leavers moved to Cork, or just below 1,500 people. Looking at the age of the Dublin leavers is interesting. The chart on the right has bars for 2011, 2016 and 2022, so the last 3 censuses. And it looks at the number of people across a number of different age groups. In 2022, the peak age for Dublin leavers was aged between 30 and 34 years. 20% of movers were aged between 30 and 34 years. In 2011, the peak age was lower than this at 25 to 29. Moving from usual residence moving to household moves. So data on tenure and type of accommodation are at the household level. So we're talking about households for the next number of slides. Just above 112,500 households moved in 2022. This was an increase of 2% compared to 2016. Tenure of the new home can be assessed. The chart on the right looks at households that moved by tenure of the new home. Once again, we have 3 bars in each cluster for 2011 in navy, 2016 in green, and 2022 in yellow. The categories of tenure that we're examining are owner-occupied without a loan or a mortgage, or bought and owned outright, owner-occupied with loan or mortgage, rented, or occupied free of rent. So the type of tenure for the new home in 2022 can be assessed as follows. 61% of the new homes were rented, 23% were bought with mortgage or loan, 11% were bought and owned outright, and 3% were rent-free. It's also interesting to assess tenure and county of new home. The chart on the right looks at households that moved by tenure of the new home and the county of residence. The navy bar on the far left looks at the percentage of owner-occupied with loan or mortgage moves. The green bar looks at the percentage of owner-occupied without loan or mortgage, or bought and owned outright. The yellow bar looks at the percentage of moves to rented accommodation. And then the light green bar on the right looks at occupied free of rent moves. It's interesting to look at the highest percentage by county. The highest percentage of rented was in Dublin, so 69% of the moves to Dublin were to rented accommodation. This is the highest percentage in Ireland. The highest percentage for mortgage or loan was Meath, so 43% of the moves to Meath were to mortgage or loan homes. The highest percentage of bought and owned outright was for Roscommon, so 24% of the moves to Roscommon were to bought and owned outright properties. And then finally, the highest percentage of rent-free was Donegal and Leitrim, so both had 6% of the moves to both of these counties was to rent-free properties. Next, we examine tenure and age. The line chart on the right looks at households that moved by tenure of new home and age of the household. The navy line looks at the percentage of those owned with mortgage or loan. The green line looks at those percentage of those owned outright without mortgage or loan, or bought outright. The yellow line looks at the percentage of those moves to rented accommodation. And the light green looks at the percentage of those occupied free of rent. Average age of the household can be assessed. The oldest age, or the largest average age, was for those moves to properties that were bought outright, with an average age of 52. The youngest average age was for moves to rented accommodation, or 34.8 years. And above that, with an average age of 38.4 years, was to moves that were secured with a mortgage purchase. Tenure and type of accommodation can be examined. The chart on the right, or on the left, I beg your pardon, looks at households that moved by tenure and type of accommodation. The navy bar in each cluster on the left is for a detached house. The green bar is for a semi-detached house. Next in yellow is for terrace houses, and then finally flats or apartments. So assessing the largest percentages, we can see that for the rented moves, 49% were to flats or apartments. For those who secured properties with mortgages, if we combine detached and semi-detached houses, we have 70%. And then finally, those who moved without a mortgage, we have 52% to detached houses. Type of accommodation and age is also assessed. The chart on the right looks at households that moved by type of accommodation and age. The navy bar at the bottom towards the left is for detached houses. Above that, the green line is for semi-detached houses. The yellow line is for detached houses. And then the line that starts at the top towards the left is for apartments or flats. Assessing average age, we can see that the lowest average age is for those who've moved to flats or apartments with an average age of 33.9 years. The next oldest is for terrace houses, where the average age was 37.4 years. Next, we have semi-detached moves with an average age of 38.6 years. And then finally, the largest average age is for moves to detached houses with 42.7 years. Type of accommodation and county can be assessed. The chart on the right looks at households that moved by type of accommodation and county. The navy bars on the left are for the percentage of detached houses. The green bar is for the percentage of semi-detached houses. The yellow bar is for the percentage of terrace houses. And then finally, the bar on the right looks at the percentage of flats or apartments. Again, it's interesting to look at this for the highest percentage by county. Of the moves to Dublin, 55% were to flats or apartments, which is the largest proportion for this category. Of the moves to Louth, 28% were to terraced houses. Of the move to Kildare, 39% were to semi-detached houses. And finally, of the moves to Roscommon and of the moves to Leitrim, 53 and 52% respectively were to detached properties. Thank you for listening to today's presentation on Profile 1, Population Distribution and Movement. As you can see on the slide, there's an extensive schedule of publications from the Census team for the remainder of the year. The next publication will be a detailed analysis on housing in Ireland, looked at in Profile 2, and that will be published on Thursday, July 27th, 2023. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. The results presented here are just a subset of the detailed results that are on the CSO's website for Profile 1, Population Distribution and Movements. There's also extensive detailed tables available at data.cso.ie. And if you do have any user queries, please contact the excellent Census team at census@cso.ie.